The night was quiet. The forest outside Ethan Cole's cabin was still, except for the soft sound of wind brushing through the tall pine trees. Ethan sat on his porch drinking warm coffee, watching the stars above the dark sky. He liked nights like this, silent, peaceful, and away from the noise of the world. He was a mechanic, a man who fixed broken machines. He lived alone on the edge of the forest, miles away from the nearest town. His life was simple. He worked during the day, came home tired, cooked himself dinner, and sat outside to watch the stars. But that night, something strange happened. A loud boom shook the air. The sound came from deep inside the forest, like thunder, but sharper, heavier. Ethan stood up fast, almost spilling his coffee. The ground trembled under his feet for a moment, then everything went quiet again. He looked toward the trees. For a second, he thought he saw a light, bright and blue, flashing through the woods. What the hell was that? He whispered. He grabbed his flashlight and his old jacket. Curiosity burned in him stronger than fear. He had lived alone too long. A part of him missed excitement. Maybe it was a meteor, he thought. Maybe he'd find a piece of space rock to sell. But deep inside, something told him it was not that simple. As he walked through the forest, the air smelled of smoke and metal. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, lighting fallen branches and patches of scorched grass. Then he saw it, a wide crater ahead, glowing faintly blue. At the center was a small broken ship. It wasn't big, just large enough to hold a few people. Ethan's breath caught. It didn't look like any aircraft he had ever seen. Its surface shimmered like liquid silver, covered with strange lines that pulsed with light. Smoke rose from one side and the smell of burning metal filled the air. He stepped closer, his heart pounding. "Is anyone in there?" He called out. Something moved inside. Ethan froze. A small hand, thin, gray, with 3 long fingers, pushed against the edge of the opening. Then another hand. 2 small shapes crawled out, coughing weakly. They weren't human. Ethan's mind went blank. The 2 figures were children. At least they looked like children. Their skin was pale gray and soft-looking, their eyes large and shining with faint light. Their clothes were torn, their faces dirty with ash. They looked scared, lost and cold. One of them fell to the ground. The other tried to help but was too weak. Ethan felt his chest tighten. They were alive. They were breathing, trembling, and crying softly in a voice that sounded like music. For a long moment, Ethan didn't move. He knew he should run, call someone, report what he saw. But as he watched them struggle, his fear faded. They weren't monsters. They were just children. He slowly knelt down and spoke gently. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The taller one looked up at him, eyes full of fear and confusion. The smaller one clung to its arm, shivering. Ethan took off his jacket and wrapped it around them both. Their skin was cold like ice. "Come on," he said softly. "You need to get out of the cold." They didn't understand his words, but they understood his voice. The taller child nodded slowly. Ethan helped them stand, and together they walked back through the dark forest. The trip felt endless. The forest was full of strange lights now, maybe fireflies, maybe something else. He kept looking back, half afraid something might follow them. The smaller child kept looking up at the sky, whispering a word he couldn't understand. When they finally reached the cabin, Ethan carried them inside and laid them near the fire. They huddled close to the warmth, their eyes half closed. Ethan gave them water, but they barely touched it. He stared at them, unsure of what to do next. Who were they? Where did they come from? And most of all, what would happen if someone else found them? Outside, far away in the night sky, a faint red light blinked, like a warning. Ethan didn't see it. He was too busy covering the children with blankets, whispering calm words to creatures that had fallen from the stars. For the first time in years, his quiet life had changed. He didn't know it yet, but his act of kindness that night would echo far beyond Earth, across galaxies, across time. And as the firelight flickered across their faces, one of the alien children opened its glowing eyes and whispered softly, "Ethan." Ethan froze. It had spoken his name. The night of the crash had just begun. The morning came slow and gray. The forest outside Ethan's cabin was still covered in mist. The air smelled of wet wood and smoke from last night's fire. Inside, Ethan sat beside the 2 strange children, still unsure if everything that happened was real. They were sleeping, curled together under an old blanket. Their skin looked softer in the daylight, with a faint blue glow running along their arms like veins made of light. Their breathing was steady, calm. For the first time since the crash, Ethan could see their faces clearly. They looked peaceful, almost human, but their eyes, large and glassy, were like tiny worlds of stars. Ethan made himself some coffee, but his hands shook. His mind kept repeating the same thought. What am I going to do? He looked at the crashed ship again through the window. Smoke still rose above the trees in the distance. It wouldn't take long before someone found it. The news, the government, the army, they'd all come looking. And when they did, they'd find these children. He looked back at them and sighed. Not if I can help it, he muttered. When they woke up, the smaller one began to cry softly. The taller child, Ethan guessed she might be the sister, held the other close, humming a tune that didn't sound human. It was beautiful, soft and sad. The sound seemed to make the air shimmer. Ethan felt something warm in his chest just hearing it. He tried to talk to them, but they didn't understand English. Every time he spoke, they just tilted their heads, eyes wide and curious. He smiled and pointed to himself. Ethan, he said. The taller one blinked, then whispered, Etan. He froze. They remembered. Somehow they were learning fast. He pointed to them, asking, You? The taller one touched her chest and said, Lyra. Then she pointed to the smaller one. Taro. Lyra and Taro, Ethan repeated softly. Nice to meet you, kids. They both smiled. It was the first time he had seen them smile, and it made something in him break a little. He couldn't explain why, but he felt responsible for them, like they had somehow become his to protect. By noon, they were hungry. Ethan tried giving them bread, but they couldn't eat it. When they took a bite, they coughed and shook their heads. He tried apples, then canned beans, even some milk, but nothing worked. Great, Ethan muttered. You're hungry, and I have no idea what you eat. He remembered the strange plants around the crash site, some glowing faintly blue in the soil. He went back to collect a few. When he returned, Lyra's eyes widened. She took one of the plants, sniffed it, then nodded. Taro grabbed another and started chewing. They ate slowly at first, then faster, like they hadn't eaten in days. Ethan watched in awe. The blue glow from the plants spread faintly across their skin, making them look alive again. Guess that's dinner sorted, he said with a weak smile. For the next few days, Ethan did everything he could to keep them safe. He taught them small English words: food, water, sleep. They learned quickly, their voices soft and echo-like. They loved the firelight and the sound of rain. Sometimes they sat near the window staring at the sky as if waiting for something or someone to come for them. One night, as Ethan fixed an old radio, Lyra walked up to him. She touched the radio gently, then sang a few soft notes. The machine sparked, then started playing clear music even though it wasn't plugged in. Ethan stared in shock. You can do that? He asked. Lyra smiled. Light, sound, same. He didn't fully understand, but it was enough to know they were far more than what they looked like. Later that night, as he cleaned up, he heard the hum of engines in the sky. He stepped outside. Military drones, 3 of them, moved in slow circles above the forest. They were scanning for something. The air smelled of ozone. Ethan's heart raced. He went back inside and whispered urgently, Hide. Now. Lyra seemed to understand. She pulled Taro close, and the 2 of them crouched behind the old couch. Ethan turned off all lights and waited. The drones passed slowly overhead, shining red beams through the trees. After a long moment, they moved away. Silence returned. Ethan sat down, his heart still pounding. Lyra peeked out and looked at him. Her eyes glowed softly in the dark. She reached out and touched his hand. Safe? She asked. Ethan smiled faintly. For now, he said. That night he couldn't sleep. He knew the government would find the crash site soon, and when they did, they'd search everywhere. He looked at Lyra and Taro sleeping beside the fire and whispered to himself, I don't know how I'll keep you safe, but I'll try. Outside, the drones disappeared into the clouds, but somewhere far above, in the blackness of space, something much bigger had already started moving toward Earth, and it was looking for them. Days passed quietly after the drones appeared, but Ethan could feel something had changed. The forest no longer felt peaceful. Birds no longer sang near the crash site, and at night, he sometimes saw lights moving between the trees, too low to be stars, too quiet to be planes. He had covered the small crater with branches and dirt, but he knew it wouldn't fool real search teams for long. The smoke had stopped, but strange symbols glowed faintly beneath the soil. Whenever it rained, those symbols shone brighter, like the earth itself was whispering secrets to the sky. Inside the cabin, Lyra and Taro stayed mostly silent now. They spent hours looking out the window, staring toward the woods. Sometimes Lyra would hum soft notes that made Ethan's radio flicker with static, as if the sound carried hidden messages. Ethan didn't understand their language, but he could sense it. Fear. That evening, as he sat fixing his old truck, the sound of heavy engines rumbled from far away. He froze and listened. It wasn't thunder. It was too steady, too organized. He stepped outside and saw dust rising over the treetops. A convoy, damn it, he whispered. They're here. Within minutes, the first military vehicle rolled into town, followed by another and another. Black armored trucks with strange antenna dishes mounted on top. Men in gray uniforms stepped out, carrying scanners that flashed red every few seconds. Ethan's stomach twisted. The search had begun. He rushed back into the cabin. Lyra, Taro, we need to hide. The two children looked up in confusion, then at the window. Through the trees, they could already hear the faint hum of engines and the crunch of boots on dry leaves. Ethan grabbed a lantern and led them outside through the back door. Come on, hurry. He took them deep into the forest to an old underground storm shelter his father had built years ago. It was small, cold, and smelled of rust, but it was hidden under a pile of fallen logs. He pushed the door open and helped them inside. Stay here, he said quietly. Don't make a sound. No lights, no noise. I'll come back when it's safe. Lyra reached for his hand, her eyes glowing faintly. Ethan, bad men? Ethan nodded. Yes, bad men. They'll take you if they find you. She looked down and said something softly in her language. Then she touched his forehead, and for a moment Ethan felt warmth spread through him, like sunlight through glass. Be safe, she whispered. He smiled weakly and shut the shelter door. Then he covered it with branches and dirt again until it looked like nothing more than an old hill. Back at the cabin, soldiers were already searching the area. One of them was scanning the ground near the porch. Another spoke into his radio. Thermal readings negative, moving to the next perimeter. Ethan walked toward them, pretending to be calm. Evening, officers. Something wrong? The lead soldier turned to him. His uniform had no name tag, only a patch with a strange symbol, a black triangle with a white circle inside it. Sir, we're conducting a safety inspection, the man said flatly. We detected unusual energy readings in this area. You live alone here? Yes, Ethan said, just me. Haven't seen anything strange except maybe a meteor a few nights ago. The soldier's eyes narrowed. Meteor, you say? Ethan nodded. It landed somewhere north, I think. Whole forest shook. The man studied him for a moment, then gestured to his team. Check that direction. Ethan stood still, heart pounding as the soldiers moved deeper into the woods, away from the shelter. He stayed there until they disappeared into the trees. Then he exhaled slowly, every muscle in his body shaking. He had bought some time, but not much. When night fell, Ethan returned to the shelter. Lyra and Taro were waiting, sitting quietly in the dark. They gone? Taro asked in his soft voice. For now, Ethan said, but they'll come back. Lyra traced something on the floor with her finger, a circle filled with tiny stars. She looked up at Ethan and whispered, They hunt us. Not safe here, Ethan frowned. Who are they? Dark ships, she said. Long ago, took many. We ran. He didn't fully understand, but he could see the terror in her eyes. Whoever was after them wasn't just from Earth. As they spoke, the wind outside changed. The air felt heavier, charged like a storm was coming, but there were no clouds. The trees swayed without sound and a faint hum filled the air. Lyra looked up sharply. They come. Ethan turned toward the sound and saw through the gaps in the trees something hovering above the forest. Not a drone. Not human. It was black, silent, and massive, its surface rippling like liquid shadow. Red lights blinked slowly beneath it, sweeping across the ground like searching eyes. Ethan grabbed Lyra's hand. Back inside now. They dove into the shelter and closed the door. The humming grew louder, shaking the ground. Dirt fell from the ceiling, then just as suddenly it was gone. Silence. Ethan sat in the darkness, breathing hard. Taro clung to his arm, whispering in a trembling voice. What are they? Ethan asked softly. Lyra stared into the dark, her glowing eyes filled with fear. Hunters, she said. They never stop. Outside, the forest was silent again, but high above, the black ship circled once more. It had found the signal it was looking for, and it wasn't leaving. The forest slept under a silver moon. The air was quiet, heavy with the kind of silence that comes before something ends. Ethan sat outside his cabin, watching the mist drift between the trees. He hadn't slept in 2 nights. His eyes were red, his hands rough from digging, hiding, running. Lyra and Taro were still in the underground shelter, safe for now. The black ship hadn't returned since that terrible night, but he knew it wasn't over. Soldiers were still in the woods, still scanning, still listening. Every evening their lights blinked between the trees like cold red stars. Ethan rubbed his face. He wanted to believe they could all just stay hidden forever, but deep down he knew that wasn't true. Nothing that big stayed secret for long. When the sun rose, Lyra and Taro came out for the first time in days. The morning light painted their faces soft gold. Taro smiled weakly and reached out to touch the sunlight like it was something magical. Lyra stood beside him, her expression calm, but her eyes held sadness. "Eton," she said softly. "We must go." Ethan froze. "Go? Go where? You're not safe out there." Lyra looked toward the north where the forest grew darker. "We fix ship. Small ship. Can fly again. We must leave before hunters come." Ethan's heart sank. He knew this moment would come, but he wasn't ready. "You can't leave yet. You're still hurt. The army's still out there." She shook her head. "We wait more, they find us. You help us much. Now, we must help ourselves." Taro tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Come with?" he whispered hopefully. Ethan smiled sadly. "I wish I could, kid. But that's not my world up there. My place is here." Lyra's eyes shimmered faintly as if she understood the pain in his words. She reached into the pocket of her torn suit and pulled out a small object. A silver crystal, smooth as glass, glowing with gentle blue light. She placed it in his hand. "For you," she said. "To remember." Ethan looked at it confused. "What does it do?" She smiled softly. "It remembers hearts. When you touch, it will sing." He didn't understand, but the crystal hummed quietly, warm against his skin. Together they walked to the crater. The ground there was still scarred, but the small ship inside looked different now. Its metal hull had mended itself, shining once again. Strange lines of light ran across it, forming symbols that seemed to breathe. Lyra and Taro moved quickly, touching panels, whispering in their language. Ethan watched from a distance, torn between pride and fear. He wanted them to be safe. He wanted them to find home. But a selfish part of him didn't want them to leave at all. The air around the ship began to hum. Dust lifted from the ground. The lights grew brighter. Ethan stepped forward. "Wait, at least tell me what happens now." Lyra turned to him. Her face glowed faintly in the blue light. "We go far, many suns away, but we never forget you, you kind." Taro ran back and hugged Ethan tightly. "Goodbye, Eton," he said in a small voice. Ethan knelt down, holding him close. "Goodbye, kiddo. You take care of your sister, all right?" Taro nodded and stepped back. The ship door opened silently. Lyra climbed inside, then looked back one last time. "You gave us life," she said softly. "We give you hope." The ship began to rise. The ground trembled, wind swirling around Ethan. Leaves flew through the air as light filled the clearing. The blue glow grew so bright he had to shield his eyes. Then with a soft hum, the small ship shot upward and vanished into the clouds. Silence returned. The crater was empty again. Only ashes and a faint shimmer on the soil. Ethan stood there for a long time, staring at the sky. The crystal in his hand still glowed faintly, pulsing with warmth. He held it tight, whispering, "Good luck, kids." That night he sat by the fire, staring at the stars. The cabin felt emptier than before. He placed the crystal on the table beside him. It began to hum again, slow and gentle, like the same tune Lyra used to sing to calm Taro. He smiled through his tears. "Guess you're saying good night," he murmured. Outside, the sky was clear and endless. Somewhere out there, 2 children were flying among the stars. Maybe they had found home. Maybe they hadn't. But he knew one thing for sure. He'd never be the same man again. Years would pass, seasons would change, but Ethan would still wait. Some nights he'd walk outside, look up at the stars, and swear he saw a faint blue light blinking among them. And each time, the crystal on his table would glow a little brighter, like a heartbeat that refused to fade. Ethan didn't know it yet, but that small crystal was more than a memory. It was a promise that one day the sky would return what he gave it. 15 years had passed since the night the sky stole Ethan's friends. The forest had grown thicker, his hair had grown grayer, and the old cabin creaked like an aging memory. Yet inside, the small crystal still glowed faintly on the table, never once going dark. Ethan Cole was no longer a mechanic in the town. The government had bought most of the land near the forest years ago, turning it into a restricted zone. People whispered that something had fallen there long ago, something not of Earth. But no one knew the truth. No one but Ethan. He now worked at a scrapyard on the edge of the desert, fixing broken machines that no one cared about. His co-workers called him Old Cole, the quiet man who never smiled. But when he was alone, he would sometimes take the crystal out of his pocket, feel its soft hum, and remember. He had waited all these years, hoping for a sign, but the stars never answered. One evening, as the sun melted behind the dunes, Ethan was sitting outside his trailer sipping black coffee. The desert was silent except for the wind. He looked up at the orange sky and whispered to himself, "You really ain't coming back, huh?" The crystal in his hand pulsed once. He frowned and looked at it. It had not glowed this brightly in years. Then, before he could react, it pulsed again, stronger this time, and made a soft musical tone like a bell ringing underwater. Ethan stood up quickly. "What the?" In the distance, something flashed across the horizon, a streak of white fire moving fast through the darkening sky. It wasn't a shooting star. It was too big, too slow, too controlled. Then came the sound, a deep hum that shook the sand beneath his feet. Ethan's heart started to race. He had heard that sound before, 15 years ago in the forest. He grabbed his jacket and climbed into his old truck. The engine roared to life after a few stubborn tries, and he sped across the empty road toward the open desert. The hum grew louder as he drove. Dust rose around him, and the crystal in his pocket was glowing brighter than ever, so bright it almost burned through the fabric. Come on," he whispered. "Don't disappear on me again." After several miles, he saw it, a huge circle of light forming in the sand ahead. The air shimmered above it like heat waves, and inside that circle, the ground was glowing blue. Ethan parked the truck and stepped out, shielding his eyes. The wind blew hard, pulling his jacket tight against his chest. The crystal in his hand vibrated and then floated up on its own, glowing brighter and brighter until it pointed toward the light in the sand. "Lyra," he called out, his voice trembling. "Taro?" The light in the desert grew higher, spiraling upward until it formed a beam stretching into the night sky. From within the beam, something enormous began to descend, silent and silver like a mountain made of glass. Ethan stumbled backward, eyes wide. The ship was massive, far larger than the one he remembered. Its hull shimmered like liquid metal, and faint blue symbols glowed along its surface. It didn't crash or land with fire. It simply arrived, lowering itself gracefully until its shadow covered the desert like night itself. The wind stopped. The air grew still. Then a section of the ship opened, forming a ramp of light. Ethan took a cautious step forward. His hands trembled, but his heart was stronger than his fear. He had waited for this moment for 15 long years. A figure stepped out of the light. Then another. They walked slowly, their forms tall and proud, covered in silver armor that shimmered under the moonlight. But when they removed their helmets, Ethan's knees almost gave out. He knew those faces. Lyra, and beside her, Taro. Grown now, their once childlike eyes glowed with strength and wisdom. Lyra's voice was calm but carried through the air like music. "Eton," she said softly. "You waited." Ethan took a shaky breath. 15 years, he whispered. "I thought I'd never see you again." Lyra smiled gently. "We promised." Taro stepped forward, holding out his hand. When Ethan touched it, he felt warmth, real warmth like sunlight trapped in his palm. "You fed us when we were weak," Taro said. "Now we feed your kind, hope." Ethan looked past them into the open ship. Inside were lights, shapes, and machines beyond imagination. He saw maps of galaxies, strange blue stars, and even what looked like images of Earth from far above. "What is this?" he asked. Lyra's eyes glowed brighter. "Home," she said, "and a message. Your people are not ready, but they must be. Darkness comes. Before Ethan could speak, the crystal in his hand flared again, projecting a bright symbol into the sand. The same star pattern Lyra had once drawn on the bunker wall. His eyes widened. That pattern, I remember, Lyra nodded. It was never a goodbye, Ethan. It was a map. Above them, the ship's engines began to hum again, lighting the desert in blue fire. Ethan looked up, his heart pounding. 15 years ago, he had saved 2 alien orphans. Now they had returned not as children but as messengers from the stars, and they had not come alone. Far above, the night sky began to change. Dozens of lights, small, bright, and moving fast, appeared across the heavens, forming lines like a silent army of stars. The sky, at last, had answered Ethan's kindness, and it was only the beginning. The desert air was still glowing from the ship's landing. A strange blue mist hovered above the sand, pulsing softly like it was breathing. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the 2 beings who had once been frightened children in his cabin. Now, they looked like legends. Lyra's armor shimmered with streams of light that moved like water, and a faint symbol, the same star pattern she once drew in the bunker, glowed on her chest. Taro stood beside her, taller than Ethan now, his eyes steady but kind. Yet behind their calm faces there was something heavy, something unspoken. Ethan swallowed hard, his voice breaking the silence. You really came back, Lyra smiled gently. We said we would, Taro's gaze softened. 15 years, Ethan. Time for us was longer. We crossed many suns to return. Ethan tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. You could have just called, he said quietly. Taro tilted his head, confused. Called? Ethan waved it off. Never mind, he looked around. The ship towered above him, silent and vast. The air felt electric, like the whole world was holding its breath. Why now, he asked. After all this time, why come back? Lyra stepped closer, her expression serious now. Because danger comes to your world. Shadows grow in the deep sky. The same ones who hunted us. Now hunt you, Ethan's chest tightened. You mean those black ships? The hunters? Yes, she said. They found your planet's signal. They come for life, energy, minds, everything. We stopped them once before, but now they spread again. He looked up at the stars. They didn't seem peaceful anymore. So you're saying Earth's in danger? Yes, Taro said softly. But this time we are not children. We came prepared. The sand beneath them began to shift. Lines of light spread outward from the ship, forming shapes and symbols across the desert floor. They looked like constellations, only moving, alive. Lyra lifted her hand and one of the lights rose into the air. It formed a glowing image, a memory. Ethan saw flashes of battles across alien skies, planets burning, ships torn apart by invisible forces. And in the middle of it all, those same black hunter ships, silent and merciless. He stepped back, breath trembling. That's what's coming here? Lyra nodded. Soon, but your world is not ready. No defenses, no unity, still fighting each other. Ethan sighed. That's humans for you. She smiled faintly. And yet one human saved us when no one else would. That is why we returned. Before Ethan could answer, a sound filled the air, a low, deep vibration. He turned around and saw dust rising in the distance. Military vehicles, black and sharp-edged, speeding toward them. Helicopters roared overhead, shining bright spotlights. Damn it, Ethan muttered. You've been seen. Lyra didn't move. Her eyes glowed brighter. We expected this. The army surrounded them within minutes. Soldiers shouted, pointing weapons. Hands where we can see them, one officer yelled. Step away from the object. Ethan raised his hands, but Lyra and Taro just stood calmly. The nearest soldier fired a warning shot. The bullet stopped mid-air, spinning slowly before melting into a drop of silver. The soldiers froze. None of them dared to shoot again. Lyra turned to Ethan. We do not wish to harm them, but they must not fear us. Before he could respond, she raised her hand. A pulse of light spread from her palm, soft but powerful. It rippled through the desert like a silent wave. When it touched the soldiers, their weapons powered down. Their radios went silent and their eyes went blank for a moment. Then calm. They stood still, as if lost in a dream. What did you do to them? Ethan asked quietly. Showed them peace, she said. Just for a moment. So they remember what it feels like. Taro looked toward the ship. It is time. The ramp opened wider, and inside Ethan saw what looked like a small vessel, sleek, silver, built for one. His name was written along its side in their glowing script. Ethan frowned. What is that? Lyra smiled softly. A gift. You gave us food when we had nothing. Now we give you flight. Your people will need someone to guide them when the skies turn dark. Ethan shook his head. Me, I'm just a mechanic. I can barely keep my truck running. You are more, she said firmly. You gave without fear. That is what makes a leader. He looked at the ship, heart pounding. It felt unreal. You really think I can help stop what's coming? Lyra's eyes glowed brighter. We do not think. We know. For a moment the desert went silent again. The soldiers stood frozen in awe. The stars above shimmered brighter. And Ethan felt something deep inside him shift, like the sky itself was calling his name. Taro stepped forward and placed his hand on Ethan's shoulder. When the stars sing, follow them. Then, together, Lyra and Taro turned toward their great ship. Goodbye, Ethan, Lyra said softly. Until the next dawn, they ascended the ramp, disappearing into the blue light. The giant ship began to rise, slow and graceful. The sand swirled in spirals beneath it, and the night turned to day as its engines glowed. Ethan watched as it climbed higher and higher, until it was just a shining dot among the stars. The smaller ship, the one with his name, remained. Its door slid open, waiting. Ethan took a deep breath. The crystal in his pocket began to hum again, singing the same melody he had heard long ago from two frightened children. He looked up at the stars and smiled. All right, kids, he whispered. Let's see where kindness takes us this time. Then he stepped inside. The desert was silent again. The air shimmered faintly where the great ship had vanished, leaving only the soft hum of wind across the dunes. Ethan stood before the smaller vessel, the one bearing his name written in glowing alien letters. The ship's surface was smooth as glass, reflecting the starlight like water. He could hardly believe it was real. 15 years ago, he had hidden two frightened alien children from soldiers and drones. Now those same children, grown into beings of light and wisdom, had returned and left him a starship. The ship's door stood open, a faint blue glow spilling out. The crystal in his pocket pulsed with the same rhythm. Ethan hesitated, his heart pounding. Well, he whispered, guess you meant what you said about returning the favor. He stepped closer, running his hand over the metallic hull. It felt alive, warm, like it was breathing. When he touched the side panel, a ripple of light spread across the surface and the door widened silently. Inside, the air smelled clean, almost sweet. The interior had no buttons, no switches, just smooth white walls with flowing lines of light that pulsed like veins. A single seat waited in the center, shaped perfectly for him, though he had never sat in anything like it before. Feels like I'm walking into a dream, he muttered. As soon as he sat down, the ship responded. The seat molded to his form and a soft voice filled the cabin, a voice that made his chest ache. Ethan, it said gently. Do not be afraid. It was Lyra's voice. Ethan looked around, startled. Lyra, you still here? The voice came again, calm and warm. A part of us remains. We left our memory in this vessel. It will guide you. He swallowed hard. You two really thought of everything, huh? Taro's voice followed, playful and light. We learned from you, Ethan. You fixed broken things. Now we fix broken skies. Ethan couldn't help but smile even as his eyes stung. You kids grew up good, he whispered. The ship hummed softly. You are not alone, Lyra said. The stars remember kindness. They will open for you. Before he could respond, the floor shifted. The walls around him turned transparent, showing the desert outside. The engines began to glow, humming with soft power. Wait, Ethan said quickly. I don't even know how to fly this thing. You do, Lyra's voice replied. Your heart already knows. The ship lifted gently off the ground, sand swirling beneath it. Ethan grabbed the sides of the seat, but the movement was smooth, like floating on calm water. The dunes shrank below him, the world spreading wide under a silver sky. The cabin lights dimmed as the stars grew brighter. Then, without warning, the ship shot upward. The clouds fell away, the sky darkened, and the earth curved below, blue and beautiful, glowing under sunlight. Ethan gasped. I'm in space. He had seen pictures before, of course, but nothing, no photo, no movie had ever shown him the truth of it. The stars weren't just lights. They were alive, endless, pulsing with quiet fire. The ship slowed, hovering among them. Lyra's voice spoke again. Look below, Ethan. He looked down. From this height, He could see the faint outlines of massive shapes moving far below the clouds. Dark shadows, silent and enormous. They weren't natural. The hunters, Ethan whispered. Yes, said Lyra. They wait at the edge of your world. But now you are not helpless. The lights inside the cabin brightened and a panel opened in front of him, revealing a small control of glowing rings. When he placed his hand near it, the ship responded instantly. A beam of light shot from its front, striking the darkness below. The shadows vanished, scattered by a single pulse. Ethan stared in disbelief. You gave me a weapon? A song, Taro's voice corrected. Light is only dangerous when guided by fear. Use it with care, he nodded slowly. I'll remember that. Then outside the window, he saw something, 3 faint blue trails in the distance, moving away from Earth. It was Lyra's ship, followed by 2 others, their engines glowing like small suns. Lyra's voice came one last time, fading softly. This is not goodbye. E10. When your world is ready, follow the stars. The door will open. Ethan felt his throat tighten. Thank you, he whispered, for keeping your promise. The voice grew faint like wind through glass. You kept yours first. The transmission ended. The cabin grew quiet again. Ethan sat for a long moment looking out at the endless stars. He thought of the forest, of the frightened eyes that had once looked up at him from the dirt. He thought of the song they used to hum at night. Then the crystal in his hand began to glow. It played that same melody, soft and clear, echoing through the ship. Ethan leaned back in the seat and smiled through tears. All right, kids, he whispered. Let's keep the light burning. The starship tilted gently, engines flaring to life. It began to glide forward, leaving Earth's shadow behind. Below him, the world slept in peace, unaware that 1 man and 2 children's kindness had changed its future. Above him, the stars opened like a path waiting to be walked. And as Ethan's ship disappeared into the horizon of space, the last echo of Lyra's voice filled the dark. Kindness is the first spark of every new world.